So this is going to come as a shock to everybody, but Pastor John MacArthur is once again under fire for comments that he made. Actually, he made these comments last year about religious freedom, but recently on Twitter, someone was discussing an issue and shared a clip of Pastor John MacArthur talking about the subject, and it raised a lot of reaction. This article from the Daily Wire talks about this whole issue, but the person who was posting on Twitter originally was Matthew Sheffield. It says that he is a former right-wing activist now working to elevate new topics and voices against fascism. And his Twitter thread was about January 6th and the events that happened that day and what led to that. And he says the far right's decades of religious anti-Americanism was the root of January 6th. So that is his premise. And he quotes different people, different things here. And one of the portions of his thread is actually a clip of Pastor John MacArthur. He says, extremist Christians love to claim they're all about religious freedom, but the truth is that they hate the idea. Sometimes when they're in a safe space, they admit this. Here's evangelical megachurch pastor John MacArthur telling you what they really think. And then he has a clip here of Pastor John MacArthur. I think this sermon was early in 2021 after the inauguration of President Joe Biden. And he does speak pretty negatively here about religious freedom. So basically, Matthew Sheffield is saying that John MacArthur is one of the people who is anti-religious freedom and has views that ultimately led to what happened on January 6th with the Capitol. So the Daily Wire article here, I will read it some. You can read it in its entirety. I will leave a link to this article in the video description of this video if you'd like to read the whole thing. But it's interesting here, the title, it says, clip of Pastor John MacArthur had critics pouncing. Turns out it was edited. I am going to pick up on this theme of editing videos at the end of this video because something interesting I want to point out about the Daily Wire. But I do want to look at this article a little bit here and make some comments. And of course, if you have thoughts on all of this, it's always interesting to hear what other people think and have good conversation about this. It says a 1 minute and 47-second clip of influential pastor John MacArthur speaking about religious liberty began circulating on social media Monday. Some critics claimed it proved the longtime teacher of the Grace to You radio ministry doesn't believe the U.S. should protect religious freedom. Others insisted his words meant he advocates for fascism, state religion, and forced conversions. The clip gained traction after being posted to a Twitter account belonging to Matthew Sheffield, a self-described former right-wing activist now working to amplify voices against fascism. It was taken from a sermon immediately after President Joe Biden's inauguration in January 2021. MacArthur shares that he wasn't impressed by an evangelical publicist who assured him the new administration would uphold religious freedom. I don't even support religious freedom, MacArthur says in the video. Religious freedom is what sends people to hell. To say I support religious freedom is to say I support idolatry. It's to say I support lies. I support hell. I support the kingdom of darkness. So that is what is in the clip that was shared by Matthew Sheffield. And this article is basically making the claim that MacArthur's words here are being taken out of context and misconstrued. So I'm going to go down further in the article where it says, it turned out, however, that along with misrepresenting the context of a more than an hour-long sermon, the brief clip itself was edited to remove a middle portion that would have further clarified MacArthur's remarks. In the full unedited clip, after MacArthur says, if the new administration supports religious freedom, get ready. Persecution will be ramped up because the more supportive they are of the devil's lies, the less they're going to tolerate the truth of Scripture. So the Daily Wire here is saying that this statement actually clarifies what Pastor MacArthur was trying to get at, and that the video clip that was shared wasn't really an accurate representation of his views. Now, I have to be honest, I think my overall reaction is that I wouldn't personally convey things the way that Pastor MacArthur did in his sermon. I do understand what he was getting at, but one thing that I notice here, even where it supposedly clarifies what he's saying, it says that if the new administration supports religious freedom, get ready, persecution will be ramped up. And my thought on that is, he's talking here about persecution if there is religious freedom, but if there's religious freedom, then there wouldn't actually be persecution. So to me, this is muddying the waters. It's just not a helpful way to convey the situation. I do understand what he's getting at, but again, if there really is religious freedom, to my way of thinking, I think what it really is getting at is that you don't persecute people based on what they believe. So to me, his statements here, even the clarifying statement, doesn't really make things all that clear, in my opinion. And at the end of this, they do give a clarification from a conservative radio host, Eric Erickson, talking about MacArthur's statements. He says that MacArthur was not talking about the ability of different faiths to worship in a multi-ethnic country of different faiths. He was talking about Christians believing Christianity is true and all other religions are false and don't really give you freedom. So I do think that's an accurate portrayal of what Pastor MacArthur was getting at. And then he further says here, Obama was big into religious freedom while he was suing nuns. That's just true, and that is what MacArthur was talking about. The religious freedom platitude masks the persecutor of Christ's church. He's right on that. And I'm sure many people would agree with what's being said there. My issue is I don't think that the way that MacArthur conveyed it was very clear. When we look at our Constitution, the First Amendment, it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That is, right within the Constitution, an acknowledgement of religious freedom. So I think it is an issue of defining terms. And while I understand what Pastor MacArthur was getting at, I really don't think his terms were consistent and clearly defined. So even if you try to argue and say, oh, well, this is what he really means, this is what he was really saying, I do understand what he was getting at, and I think he raises up some questions we do have to think through right now in our culture. But in my opinion, it just wasn't really articulated in a very helpful way. And my basis for saying that is that the fact that we have to clarify everything that he's saying here and put a lot of caveats on it. When someone says they're not for religious freedom, I just think that can easily be misconstrued, misunderstood. And Pastor MacArthur, when he was trying to keep his church open in 2020, obviously wanted in that case for the United States to be in support of religious freedom, for his ability to worship freely without government intervention. So in my way of thinking, in my mind, freedom of religion is a tenet of how we were founded as a country, and it is a good thing, although I understand what he's getting at and what his concerns are. But let me just say one more thing about this article here that is basically taking issue with the clip of Pastor John MacArthur being taken out of context and being edited. I found this so ironic because it was just the other day that I saw a Twitter post from one of the Daily Wire hosts, Michael Knowles, and actually a couple of the hosts shared this. And this is how he presented this video. Trudeau from Canada, how about a handshake, President Bolsonaro? And then Bolsonaro, according to Knowles, gives him the finger. Here's the video. Notice here that is a 20-second clip. And in this clip, we see Trudeau. I think this is at the G20 summit. He's sitting down, looking around. He gestures to President Bolsonaro, who then turns the other way. And so just that clip there, and that's 20 seconds long, does seem to look like what Michael Knowles is presenting here, that Bolsonaro didn't want to acknowledge Trudeau. But actually, you'll see here, here's a 23-second clip of the exact same situation. So everything is exactly the same here. Trudeau's looking around, and then he's going to gesture here to President Bolsonaro, who turns around. But here's the last 3 seconds. President Bolsonaro actually does shake Trudeau's hand. So what was really taking place there? Well, Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire was taking a situation out of context. That video was edited. 3 seconds made all the difference in the world. So I bring that up just to show a real inconsistency there with what the Daily Wire is complaining about versus what it was actually doing the day before. But also with all of these things, it really just exemplifies something that I want to convey here, that I really think we have a problem so much as humans with presenting each other fairly. And I'm all for debate, I'm all for arguments, but I think we need to be fair in the way that we present other people's views. And I would actually say in the way that we seek to understand other people's views. And so even with a situation like with Pastor MacArthur, I want to be fair to him and really understand what he's getting at. On the other hand, I want pastors themselves to be fair in how they represent other people within the culture. And I think this is just something we all have to think about in our own lives. Are we really seeking to understand other people? And it's fine to address issues, but we really need to understand what the situation actually is if we're going to address the issue accurately. And it is really just a frustration of mine. I just want to really voice that here, that I really think we struggle with that. It's something I've been discouraged about lately, if I'm honest. But I know it's just part of human nature, part of the human condition, that when we have arguments about things, we're often not fair to the other side. And so we often set up what are called strawman arguments. They're a weak version of the real argument. Anyway, I just wanted to point out this whole situation, and that actually the Daily Wire, in seeking to address it, actually kind of brought up something that they themselves do as well, at least in this instance that I showed here, taking a video out of context. So be very careful about taking people out of context. Be careful about whether you're really being fair in presenting someone else's view. I would actually encourage people, really read the people that you disagree with, so at least you understand what they really said and where they're really coming from. If there's someone who writes something, or if they've done a video, actually watch the video to see what it is they have to say. My goal in my videos is to bring up different issues, and I hope that we help each other to think through things. That's really a goal of mine. I want people to be able to think through things. And that's why I care so much about being accurate in the information that we have. I've talked a lot on this channel about the whole pandemic situation, the COVID issues, and all the things we have to deal with there. And I'll be honest, one way that I've come to look at things in my life is I don't want to win. That's not really my goal. It's not to win. It's just to be correct as best as I can be and to get to the truth of things. But I think sometimes as humans, many times as humans, we have this deep down desire to win, to be right. And so what I'm really saying in a lot of this is, we need to think about different issues. And when it comes to religious freedom, I actually think that as Christians, there are difficult things about living in a culture like the United States, where we have so many different religions today, so many different viewpoints. And it's one of the reasons we have to do the hard work of thinking about things on a deep level, because there's just so many views out there. Anyway, I could go on and on about this. I just wanted to share some thoughts on this situation. I hope that in some way that all of my thoughts on these things has been helpful to you. Again, feel free to leave your comments and thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you so much for taking some time to look at this topic with me from a Frisch perspective.